Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I skip.
All right, if we could do introductions. Deb, I'm gonna go to you first on Zoomland.
Sure, I'm just trying to save bandwidth. This is Deborah Wright. I represent Rockingham on the Bells Falls Union High School.
Thank you. David?
Me? Oh,
Yes.
thank you. David Clark representing Westminster on the Union High School Board.
Tanya Noyes represent Athens.
Mike Stack representing Rockingham.
June Streeter representing Westminster.
Jason Terry representing Rockingham.
Andy Haas, Superintendent.
Kelly Ryan, principal.
Rob Welch representing Rockingham. And noted absent is Darcy Sprague and Jamie Sterling. And Priscilla Lambert. Nope, Priscilla, there we go. So we just started the introductions and you're ready time to introduce yourself.
So 6 o'clock catches me by surprise. Priscilla Lambert, I'm representing Rockingham.
Thank you, Priscilla, and welcome. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none. Any communication and public comment out there? Anybody in Zoom like to participate? All right, seeing none, ready to move on. So first up, we have to review and approve board minutes for July 18th and October the 11th. I get a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept as written the minutes for July 18th and October 11th.
Right, okay. Deb, how do you vote?
I would like to vote aye, although I think there's some stuff missing on October 11th, but okay. Aye.
David?
Yes.
Fine.
Yes.
White? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Rob? Yes. And Priscilla?
Yes, and I want to commend Darcy on getting the July one out.
Yeah, that was very, very good of her. And I'm not sure, we missed warning the 9:28 minutes, so we'll get them on the next agenda. So thank you, everybody, for getting those brought up, and thank you, Tara, for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
To the jury for what they say is the right decision.
There's no doubt in my mind that the defendant would have.
Okay. So we have some new business for discussion. Principal update. Kelly, I know it's been a short, like, week or 10 days. Do you have anything new since anything that's
Sure.
happened?
Sure, just can provide a few quick informal updates. One is the testing was completed as planned last Monday, Tuesday. So again, that was for the D-wing to assess the recalibration of the machines, to assess the C-wing, just to assess how that initial carbon filtration unit deployment was going, and then to retest the gym and auditorium, including some of those peripheral spaces, right? To see if we can in fact reopen that in the near future. So that was great. We also had the scientists, the research team from the University of Iowa came on Friday. And they arrived late Friday afternoon with the Department of Evan Pendleton came down from the Department of Environmental Conservation with them. And it was actually really interesting to do that 2-hour walkthrough with that team. And you kind of get a close up of some of the materials and spaces that they were really honing in on as part of that the sort of initial source investigation work. So spent a lot of time in the nooks and crannies, the maintenance rooms off the gym in particular, looking at the beams in the gym, looking at the adhesive under the carpet here. And was just really getting a richer sense of where some of that source investigation work was going to hone in on. Again, these units will be deployed for about a month, and then Evan from the DEC will be picking up those units and shipping them back for that team to begin their work. They were super accessible team. They're also really eager to connect with some of our science classes, and I know the science department was really interested in collaborating and hosting an opportunity for those researchers, especially the student researchers, to speak about some of the work that they're doing and some of the things that the students are seeing in the building, which I think will be a really nice opportunity. So we'll get that set up in the next month or so. In my next principal's report, I'll include this document and some more language around it, but just naming that BFUHS, so the Vermont Student Assistance, I think I'm getting it right. Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, who works with a lot of our students here in the building and throughout the state of Vermont, post-secondary planning, post-secondary access. They actually, just to my knowledge, just late last week, have provided something called a senior survey. They had outreach to ask about their ability to implement the survey tool. They do it, I guess, every other year here in the building. So they were outreaching about this spring and the ability to come back into the building. And through that conversation, they're like, hey, do you want your 2022 data? I said, I would love that, right? So I think it just sheds some additional data points that I think will be helpful to next conversations about how our seniors think about their post-secondary planning. So again, I'll include that in the next formal report. Just lots of work pulling the proficiencies and things like that from Power School in advance of our budget committee meeting again on Thursday. So we're busy kind of trolling the nooks and crannies of our spaces for all of that information. So other than that, it's been busy but good.
Hey, any questions for Kelly? Great, well, thank you for providing all that feedback, and thank you, appreciate it. It's a good reminder that we need to get a budget agenda and Mr. Clark, so we can get that one properly. So next up, we have buildings and grounds update. Possible action needed. First, I asked Mr. Streeter to come and kind of fill us in on what needs to be done as far as an emergency plan. I know this school back in the day was a place to come when Vermont Yankee, was alive and well, and it was a shelter basically. And just in case there's a disaster or the way the world is, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right? So I asked Mr. Streeter to come and kind of fill us in on what would happen and what if you need anything from us.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm Cole Streeter, the Westminster Fire Chief. So this book is set up for the reception center plan. This is 2014, but everything in here talks about how the school will be run, what would happen. It was designed for an emergency at Vermont Yankee. The towns of Brattleboro, Halifax, Vernon, Guilford, Dummerston were all going to be coming here, or at least whoever would. And it goes through, this covers everything that you could possibly think of. Animal control, of course, that was back when you had to worry about the radiation. So you had monitoring, you had vehicle decontamination and special places for contaminated vehicles. You had personnel monitoring and possible decontamination, registration, reunification. Red Cross was a big part of it. And they were all to come here. Schools were going to come here. And of course, a lot of people might not, but it was designed to run and house people for a short period of time, and then they would be sent off to come care places. And they, like I say, this book spells everything.
Thanks. Is that your book? Is that a copy?
That's a copy, and I'm sure that we could come up with some more because I don't do anything with them anymore. So, yeah, that somebody could go through and pick out the things that need to be done, and there's quite a lot that doesn't necessarily need to be done. Because hopefully we have to deal with it all. Be more, I would assume, natural disaster. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been taken to have. I didn't realize all the towns would be So Halifax, Dummerston, what the other council?
Let's see. It is Brattleboro, Demerston, Guilford, Halifax, and Marlboro.
My only question would be, do we need to get Rockingham involved as well, like, Sean McGinnis or anything like that, or?
Yeah, the volunteers that staffed the high school were from all over the area, so absolutely, and we picked from wherever we could get. Yes.
And there's something, last question, I promise.
That's
Something
okay.
bad happened, you would be the guy in charge, right? How does that work?
I mean, we have an emergency management director, but this spells out who is in every position. Yeah. Got it.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in incident command, depending on the situation that's happening.
Yeah.
Different agencies as they come in might take over control.
Yeah, you would probably have an overall incident commander, but yes. Yep. Yeah, if it's, you know, a fire or something like that, you might have more in the first aid area. Yeah, flooding, you may have, you know, more in having to take care of people that don't have anything in it.
So like if the federal government were involved, they might come in and have to do code stuff. I know, I understand what I just said, but I mean, but that's kind of depending on the disaster, I guess.
Yes, right, what type of an emergency it is, or yeah, and how many people you're looking at evacuating, you know, is it a real large area, or is it a, you know, a small area, Athens, or, you know, whatever, somebody that had a severe flood, or, yeah. Right, instead of power outage, whatever.
Any questions for Mr. David?
Yeah, cool.
Yes,
We're of course at this point dealing in theoreticals, but last time we were in the room dealing in theoreticals, Stephen Major, when he was a member of this board, raised a very interesting question. If you had that theoretical, really big event in February with 3 feet of snow on Hadley Field, and this is rhetorical only right now, but how would we handle what theoretically might be a very large parking problem?
this does spell it out, but they do have contractors to come in and plow.
Okay,
Yeah, the town, when we had a town meeting one year, the town came in and had the parking lot cleared in half an hour. But yes, so it is, and it's spelled out.
wonderful.
If the driveway happened to be inaccessible, it's in there.
Thank you, Paul.
That's great.
Good job. Hope to see you again in 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll get a
Any other
copy.
questions?
Yeah, I'll get another copy and get it up to you, and I'm sure there are all sorts of different. Yes.
Maybe one of
You
those.
do some like.
We're finding it in some places.
That's right.
What year did you say that was?
This was 2014, this copy. Yeah.
Latest.
So that's more of a major disaster as opposed to an emergency operations plan that we have. We have a for our local school.
Yeah, I don't know when they stopped with the plan for Vermont Yankee. How long is that thing? Not that, oh, yeah.
Six
So they're
here.
And they used to we had to be reevaluated, was it every 3 years? And they would come right in, the federal government would come in, the state would come in, we'd have to set everything up, and they would bring people through and do the monitoring, and yeah.
Yeah. go ahead.
That's a good question.
Okay, just one.
Don't leave the
So
book.
that's right, it's like the genie, don't mess up.
Our gym is offline currently,
Yes.
right? And I imagine that space is.
Yes, that was a huge area.
Yeah, so until that comes back online, how does that influence our ability to give support?
Right. The gym was really the area that they would bring most everyone into and be monitored, because of course they would have to be monitored. And then if they were clean, they would just go right through, and there are all sorts of different areas in the school that would be housed or whatever they had to do with them. Yeah, everybody would be registered. So because you're not having to monitor necessarily everyone, that they bring it in somewhere else. That's okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay.
And the reason why I asked, Cole to come in is, we're, also just about set up for the generator to be 100%. And Kelly and her team is working on that as well, for the Building and Grounds Committee. So, you know, just I think it's always good to be prepared instead of reaction all the time. So, you know, we just want to have that. So,
There for the worst, hope for the best.
right. Thank you. So, under Building and Grounds also, Andy, can you mind providing an update on where we're at with like the HVAC or I have some of the notes from the Building and Grounds we can kind of go over, but
So I'd asked Mr. Horton to kind of, give an update just because he's been involved in it. So, so bids are due back at, by the end of October. And then when we have those bids back, we'll be coming to this board, with those bids and, be looking for a motion to allow us to, expend, federal funds, in your building. That would be the, next big piece because, we will need that as we push up for, project approval on the HVAC system. So as soon as those bids come in, we'll bring them here and, be looking for a motion on that. And a lot of the beginning dates as far as, when we might be able to start doing work is something we have to coordinate with, DEC and, our consultants, as far as, the work they're doing on the PCBs. The roof replacement project, these are in the order of what he believes the way we should be handling them. Should follow the HVAC project, as there were numerous roof openings to be constructed, the new roof units. The roof project is dependent on the HVAC project timing, which is dependent on the PCB outcome, so we can see the chain of events there. But they are working on putting bid packages together so that we can bring those in. Currently, you all held off on moving forward with a bond for the roof project. The next opening for that is coming up December, January-ish. So I'll be working with Mr. Dezina to come back to you all to authorize us to go back out if we want to pick that up because we hopefully look to try and do that this coming summer. The driveway and the parking lot. Right now we're in the design phase, so there's a piece that has to be done way ahead of time. Anticipate bidding in early 2024, and the work is planned to be conducted starting in the spring of 2024 for the parking areas and running through the summer of 2024. Again, trying to minimize the disruption that we might have to the entire campus. Obviously, it's going to be a challenge to have to try and work around that because there's only one way in, one way out. So that'll be a piece. The tennis court replacements. Excuse me. Oh, by the way, we did not go out the bond. We didn't go out for the bond on the driveway as well. So that will be again another piece in January or December, January when we have to go for the bond. It's just to go out for those bids. The tennis court replacement. We're presently got out there looking for bids. Bids are due November 7th. And the work there we're looking to do is in the summer of 2024. And so the surface material there, it's I talked to one of the vendors that the temperatures have to be right. So it's like you gotta have a nice week of no rain, heat, you know, or you gotta have heat. You can't have rain in the forecast and stuff like that. And so that's really kind of important. So anything else you want to
So Can you go over the plumbing? There's been some-
Recently this year, we've had two plumbing issues here at the building, where we've had backups. One was in the back shop area, in the area that transportation was using as a work area, and then when the PCBs came in, we had to switch the boys' athletics over there. So we had a backup in sewer there. And then just as school kind of started, we had a backup that came out of one of the bathrooms in the hallway with water and sewage coming out into the hallway. Both of those seem to be due to the makeup of the pipes. The one in the bathroom that came out in the hallway, there were some wet wipes that were used. Nothing recent, according to Jeff. It was something that's been used over time. Some of those are disposed, they degrade, some don't. But because of the type of pipe, things get corroded and got stuck, and that's what caused it. I think we're going to need to look into, are those pipes under the slab? So you don't have a basement here, you have a slab. So do those pipes run under the slab, or do they run through the slab? And is fixing it both expensive? And I don't know, have a price tag. I talked to another superintendent who had a similar problem. Their issue was their pipes were going through their slab. So they couldn't just get in there, you'd have to jack a hammer up the entire slab, basically. But it may be an issue that we're gonna have to look in and address. The recommendation from Jeff, and I don't disagree with him, is to get someone out here and, shove a camera down there and kind of get some pictures of what's going on with the systems.
And I think if we asked, because we have a lot to do, so we asked Kelly to give us a priority list, like a 5-year list of like importance, and then so then we can, because sometimes it feels like we're just shooting darts at a dartboard and trying to fix things, but if we make a list of priorities, so we can kind of punch them out, that would be great. You're gonna have that to us by the first meeting in November, is that right? It's pretty much that. Any questions? Jim?
I had heard a little bit of scuttlebutt about the roof replacement project. If the PCBs are actually in the roofing material, the paint, would that be covered by a reimbursable, and we wouldn't have to go for a bond? And when will we know that?
So I'd have to get back to you on full speculation, on a full answer, but there is been some speculation that the PCBs may be in the paint that is in the roof deck, not the other side, so on our side of the roof deck. Meaning not on the outside, but on the, there's a couple of different ways that if it were in there that they told us that they could address that issue. One of the ways is to come in and kind of sandblast it all off. The other way is to remove with the roof deck. So I think we've got to do some source testing before we can even have that knowledge of it. But could it be reimbursable? I guess I'd have to ask that question. So I wouldn't want to, but it sounds like it could be in the realm of it. But just as a reminder that there's only $13 million out there
Until
for
January.
projects.
January.
And if of Montpelier, they put more money aside, then that would be fine, but, we don't know that piece of it, so.
My other question is, when you and Jim start looking at the bonds, can you look at local bonds as well as federal bonds? Because the little birdie told me we might be better off doing a local bond, and then we wouldn't be thrown in with all these other maybe non functioning.
Sure,
places.
we'll come back and look, compare.
Thank you.
Sonia, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Priscilla?
Yeah, and to follow up on June's, I was listening to the radio on the way in, and the state and governor are talking about doing a fund where they address disasters and all kinds of type things in that. And I'm thinking that possibly the PCB issue may end up being funded through some of that. So that might be something that's coming up as well, and something to keep an ear out on.
We have heard nothing about that.
Yeah, it was just on the radio.
So I'm just saying,
I don't know any more than what I just heard. That's it. But just listening and finding out might be good.
Any other questions? David?
Yeah. Did a somewhat deep dive in the minutes and agendas for the last year and a half over the weekend. And I was very curious about some of these large projects, because when your spending gets up into the millions, I believe that we have an obligation to obtain what are known as bid specs, which are an engineer's parameters for what the project should entail. And then that informs contractors as to what the scope of the job is, and allows contractors to provide us with an estimate, or have it help us possibly even a quote. Okay, I do recall that when we had our very lengthy discussion about the HVAC report that came back in April of 2021, that the Buildings and Grounds Committee finally prevailed upon this board to go back to the engineer that drafted that report and the engineering, and have them draw bid specs. Okay, I'm all right with that. I am not aware that any bid specs or any sign off from this board to seek a proposal for bid specs has taken place so far with the roof replacement. I would like to stand corrected on that if that's not accurate, but you cannot intuit the status of those bid specs, the lack thereof, from the minutes which are available from 2022. And it's got a little bit better in 2023 because at least they started to improve committee meeting minutes. There ain't nothing in 2023 that would cover roof bid specs. So I'm tossing it back to administration as to whether that step has actually been undertaken yet, to seek from this board permission to go out to receive bids, to produce bid specs, which then leads to bids from contractors for the roof. I believe that we've hired an engineer in Brattleboro. Heaven help me, I can't remember his name, but they're the firm that rebuilt the Brooks House after the fire down there about 10 years ago.
Stephen and
And
Associates.
it's like, what's that, June?
Stephen and Associates.
Stevens and Associates, thank you so much. And I believe that Stevens was asked to produce bid specs for the driveway. Another unsearchable, unfortunately, on the WNESU website. I believe the tennis courts are under at $30,000 roughly, under the limit where we might need to entertain bid specs. But I'm uncertain as to what the scope of the science area project is, because I did read through your notes, Kelly, over the weekend, but couldn't seem to find any numbers attached to that. So I want to bring that to the board's attention. It's again, depending upon the size of that project, that's a step that I believe, will need to go through in order to move expeditiously towards addressing the science area. So I'm gonna try to boil it down to two things. One is that, past actions of this board and its Buildings and Grounds Committee, should be searchable some way, somehow. I would hope ideally through the WNESU website. I am asking for confirmation as to where exactly we stand in the process in terms of creating or already having created bid specs for the roof, because if we haven't, I think we need to get after that sooner rather than later. And that roughly sums me up on buildings and grounds, except to say that these things are important, because when we're talking about spending millions of dollars potentially on infrastructure, I think we need to be able to wrap a price tag around just how many millions we're talking about, so we have some idea of how we're going to fund it. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, David. You want to respond to it?
So David, that's what I said at the beginning, we're in the process of getting those bids right now. So that's what Steve Horton is working on right now, is getting the bids. We don't have a number on those. If we were given speculation costs by the previous administration on some of those different projects. So we had, the board had, to my knowledge, given us, had asked us to go forward to look into those. And, you know, when we're talking about like a project that's doing in the summer, we have to start working ahead of time. And so, but Steve Horton is currently working on those bid specs right now.
Okay, and what I'm asking for, I want to be very clear about this. I want to be absolutely certain that this board is aware of what those bid specs actually are, who has created them, and when, based on those bid specs, we will go out to bid for these projects.
I will double check with Steve Horton if it's okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody? All right. David, to answer your question, we have been most recently on all the committees. They are doing notes, and they are available on the websites.
2023, it's wonderful. 2022, ain't nothing there for committee agendas or minutes.
Then they didn't happen then. Anyway, so next up, is there any other questions on building and grounds? All right. So next up, we have a summary of Bells Falls Junior High School Board's 6-month commitment to listen to all stakeholders around portrait of a graduate, to seek guidance from the community, both internally and externally. There's no action on this. So what I was hoping to do is, Mike, you did a lot of the heavy lifting for this. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is just kind of go through, take your time. We have plenty of time. We got all night, whatever you want to do. Go through like page at a time, like go through the page and then see if there's any questions and then kind of keep going.
Sure, there's a lot of data here. We won't go through the whole thing, but go ahead.
Andy's got a question.
No, I don't have a question. Give me a minute. Get that slide
Sure.
back up.
Yeah.
So Amy's gonna make sure that's up for Fact TV so they can follow along through it.
Looks good.
I'll be your fan.
All right, I'll just holler through switch. So, you know, this listening tour started 5 months ago, and I'm looking at Kelly because that feels like a million years ago. But here we are, we have the summary of this process. So that's what's happening tonight, is we're bringing that information to the board. So you get, you're on the first page, and that's where we'll start. So the bottom line was, the objective of this listening tour was to collect input from the community, a diverse set of inputs from community members. And we were really asking questions that were very high level questions, as you can see here highlighted in yellow. Are we meeting all the academic needs of our students? Is our curriculum appropriate for today's job market? And the objective was to collect this input and bring it back to the administration in this form, share that with them to support their efforts to drive better results for students. Now, it's important to acknowledge that there was no role confusion in this process. The administration develops and implements the curriculum. It's not the board's responsibility, but the board's job really is to ask questions, and then eventually approve the curriculum that we come up with. The other thing to note is the listening tour, this process was never a part of the budget process. So sometimes it's easy to have those things fade into each other, but one is a very high level discussion, one is a process discussion. This was not part of the budget process. Andy just switched to the end. So how did we go about this? We had a diverse series of 8 speakers that came in. I see actually one of them in the room tonight, Andrew Dunbar, who was one of our students that came in. We brought in a collection of diverse speakers, students, business leaders. Casey Cota was here. We brought in administration from the tech centers. And most importantly, we brought in folks from our own school, Heather Warriors, Kelly O'Ryan. Next page, please. And here's a kind of a sample of some of the comments that we received. So Mary Wallace, one of our elite students, was wondering, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these comments, but she was wondering why more students weren't taking advantage of some of the advanced placement offerings. Casey Cota, a local employer, was asking, could we see more applied math and science for the graduates? We had Scott Farr, the leader up at the River Valley Tech Center, talking about barriers to access for students that wanted to go to the tech center. Then also we had our own Heather Warriors, who's responsible for job-related program here at Mills Falls High School, talking about connecting students' academics with real-world applications. So that's just a collection. And these slides, by the way, are available on the website because they're connected to the agenda. So if anybody wants to look at them more than just online. So we collected this data, we're bringing it to the board. So really now it's, I believe, and the next steps would be really more discussion. I saw Andy released some data on graduation requirements. One of the things that you mentioned in that was potentially pulling together a task force to look at some of these issues, which I think the reality is when you step back, a lot of the things that we found and that we're presenting to the board really dovetails into, to the administration, dovetails into what the administration is doing. But I myself found, we need to discuss this. We need to discuss it in a public forum in front of the community. But I also, as one would imagine, actually more questions came to the surface for me as we went through the process. So what I have here in the orange is the school's mission statement. And the second to the last line says, each student to reach full potential with the capacity to choose from multiple pathways of success. And so that to me is a high level philosophic comment. But then as I start to peel things back, the questions that I had were, does our process support this adequately, the multiple pathway objectives for the students? Another question that I had was, and one of the reasons I asked that question is we don't have a, if you will, a full-time or a flexible pathways coordinator. We have Heather Warriors, who is working on job-based education, which is great, but as we heard from Kelly, the flexible pathways program is really kind of being addressed, not necessarily hit or miss, but it's being addressed by various people. And I just want to make sure that we are giving it a fair shot because it's an important piece for the hands-on learners. The second comment or question that I would raise would be, our graduation requirements. And one of the things that we heard from Scott Carr at the River Valley Tech Center was he talked about barriers to access and how he's found that it's not just Bells Falls. He actually was quite complimentary of Bells Falls, but because of graduation requirements, some students can't get into the tech center until junior year, which for some people is late. And, you know, they're, whether it's frustration or they're, you know, trying to find their purpose in life. Junior year can be kind of late to be getting into that. I'm looking at Andrew is here. One of the things that Andrew shared with us was not only was it a barrier to access, but it was a barrier to success for Andrew. Andrew is a hands-on learner, and to be very candid, he and his father came in, and one of the questions, or one of the points that they made was that, you know, some of Andrew's hands-on learning approaches, you know, were not understood and perceived as a discipline issue. Subsequently, Andrew's gotten into the tech center and he's doing fantastic. So love to hear those success stories. And the reality is, I just want to make sure when we have these discussions and we ask these kind of questions that they're not misinterpreted. These questions are not anti-academic, or they're not about lowering our standards or our expectations for our students. But honestly, it's about honoring learning differences. Well, let's face it, there are a lot of learning differences out there. And, you know, I think that it's important that our process acknowledge that and make it as easy for the elite students, or as it has for the elite students, for some of the non-elite or maybe non-bound students. So those are my two questions, and there's a lot of data here. If anybody wants to go through anything in the deck, happy to answer any questions, but that's probably enough for me. I'll turn it back to you, Jason, if you want to.
Does anybody have any questions so far about any in the audience? Is there anybody on Zoom? Oh, go ahead.
Can you just speak up a little?
Yeah.
It's really hard to hear.
Sure it is.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions about what Bernard said so far? Is there anybody on Zoom up there? Right. So there's no questions so far. Mike, you want to keep going about the state of Vermont graduation requirements and go through the credit summary, or what's your pleasure?
You know, honestly, I think that, you know, I think, like I said, the data's here. We presented it to the administration. Andy just put out his goals, and one of the goals was equitable, effective allocation of resources. And I think that's the bottom line on all of this. So there's the equitable piece, which is the college bound versus non-college bound. I just want to make sure, because, you know, when you have these conversations, you start to hear back from the community. And I think there's a misunderstanding that this process or the discussions that we're having here are about somehow taking away from the elite students. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, those are our, if you will, our, you know, our academic athletes, and there's nothing about this, and from my perspective anyways, but that's why we should have these discussions in public and in front of the community. That's about taking away from their students, and, you know, those students can, I think Andy said, can earn up to 32 credits currently in our system. But let's face it, there's some students in our school that they don't have the same objectives in terms of going to college, and they also don't have the same learning styles. And I just want to make sure that we're taking care of those students also. So I think, you know, to just digress a little bit, I think that, you know, there are a few things out there, and some of the data that I provided here. I think the 4-year college prep paradigm, which I think our program, our, you know, if you will, portrait of a student or curriculum, I mean, there's a lot of terms for it. It's geared 28 credits. It's kind of geared more towards that direction. But I think the reality is the world's changed. The job market's changed. There's reasons that, the graduation rate in college is half essentially of the students that go to college graduate. So, there's a lot of folks that, whether they start college and don't make it through, end up with debt, there's opportunity cost of not working and going to college. And so I think that we really just have to make sure that we're directing those students in the right manner. And most importantly, providing the opportunities for success. Again, I keep looking at Andrew and I know his success story. And, there's nothing more important for us, I believe, as a school board than to provide that opportunity, for all of our students. And that's pretty much what this is about.
Great. So I want to commend not just you, but all of us and all the board members and also Rockingham board that showed up, and all of the teachers that came and all of the public that came. It was a long 6 months. So my question I would like to have answered is what are the next steps? How do we take it from here? And then it's not just wasted, and I really want to spend a few minutes on that. What should our next steps be to finish this? And then I had questions for the administration. If you folks thought it was a useful tool, and how would you guys use it? So I had those two questions. So I don't know what, I'd like the board to help me. What are the next steps? What's the process that we need to follow? Anybody? David.
Okay, kind of a Kelly question. Assuming that this board feels a commitment to flexible pathways, what are the next steps that you as the principal would like to take to address moving in the direction of flexible pathways more effectively? What do you need for resources? What does this board need to do to help you get there?
I appreciate the question. I don't think I can answer that at a level of detail that I want yet, except to know that
It might defy a 30-second response.
Well, I mean,
understand that.
Yeah, it's, I would say that conversation has been started. I'm looking at other schools, right? I think I centered this in the last meeting, that other schools tend to have a flexible pathways coordinator, someone who is looking at those different spokes of the wheel with a really high level of intention. Not saying that that's not happening, but I think it's happening in kind of fits and starts, and I think we would welcome the bandwidth, right? Again, both in terms of time, but also content expertise. So there's a lot of opportunities that exist out there, but we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to crosswalk the proficiencies, right? In some of those experiences. So looking at the tech programs, looking at some of the work-based learning, some of those other service opportunities, right? Those alternative education pathways, we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to crosswalk, right? Beyond awarding an elective here or there. There might be more that we can do to support students in those experiences with a higher level of attention, right? But we need to reflect on how can we do it within our existing resources, or do we need more resources to be able to do that? I don't know yet. I think one of the things we're also looking at that I think will help kind of give the flexible pathways more meaning for students in particular is making some of those opportunities like the PLP process and senior project credit bearing, right? Which I know kind of flies in the face of some of the other conversations that are happening. But I do think in looking at some of the other models at schools, that PLP process in particular, right out of the gate, and I'm not even talking freshman year, I'm talking again, thinking of it along that 7 through 12 continuum, right? Which is what that proficiency piece tend to get at. We got to start sooner, start at a higher level of intention, and really map it out for our students in a more concrete way, how meaningful that opportunity is to engage in that PLP process in particular. So there's a lot of different ways the schools are doing it. I don't know that we've landed. I know we haven't landed as a community here in terms of what our preference is. I just know that I think folks are eager or becoming eager. I don't know, everyone's eager. I'm eager. I think others are getting there, kind of dig into that conversation. But
Well, a very brief response, Kelly. Number one, I have hopes that our work with New Solutions K-12 will help create some of those 7 through 12 synergies.
Yep.
Of course, that remains to be seen. But even more immediately, there has been some discussion around the possibility of a flexible pathways czar. And I realize that's something that you really need to spend some time looking at. However, we are in the process, at least halfway through the budget process. And if you are able to identify resources, I'm talking the long green here, Kelly. If you're able to identify resources that you feel we are likely to need to start addressing some of those steps toward flexible pathways, we really should be hearing about that, I believe, sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Anybody else? Tanya, we got a spot a little bit.
Sure.
So in your line of work, you have to have a lot of systems and procedures, and there's a lot of checklists and stuff like that. What could you recommend for us as a board to make sure that we're not here 3 years from now saying, hey, remember when we talked about that Mike Stack thing, God rest his soul? You know, if we're trying to put that in place, yeah, what would you recommend?
Well, I know my place of work, well, for me, for learning, I am a very hands-on learner, and I'm a director of a laboratory now, but I could not go through a regular classroom, like some of these, I give lots of credit to some of these students that can. I cannot do that. I'm a hands-on, so I did make it. My line of work, I would love to, I have a lot of students that come in. I would love to see more science, math. And like, I think Coda, Casey had a lot of, I think we see it all around. All of his things that he wanted in a student is what we see, in the hospital. So yeah, I think we're right on track with what people are saying, for sure.
That's your feedback.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Rob, Priscilla? Yeah. So, my next question, I guess, for you guys is, Kelly and Andy, whoever wants to go first, like, what did you guys think about it? Was it useful? Is it something you're gonna, kind of a loaded question, is it something you're gonna take and kind of try to implement? You know, that's
Not at all. Not at all.
that's our fear.
No, so I think it fits in right with NEASC, right, which is the accreditation, New England Secretary of Schools, and which is going to be coming up in March. And Kelly has learned that there's some work that was supposed to be accomplished that still needs to be accomplished, and you can go back. And some of that is the community as a whole needs to define what is important for the graduate. And so it fits in with that whole thing because, you know, we always look for, we want all students to be college or career ready and or, you know, because not every kid is gonna take the same path, and we know that. And so I think it's really important that as a community, there needs to be that opportunity to kind of define what does that look like. And community is not one person, it's not Kelly, it's not the board, it's all of the community coming together and having those conversations. And so I think some of the work that needs to continue is smaller groups that don't feel so formal, where people feel comfortable to share, is going to be important to be able to have that. Surveys, we're getting feedback from people. But it's also, I think Kelly's pointed it out, and David just spoke to it also, is my experience has been that throughout the SU, we're very siloed with our different districts. And so what might be good for one district might not be good for another district, or that's the opinion. And so that conversation of 7 through 12, well, we're all one supervisory union, and the majority of our students are going to go from our middle school to our high school. The conversation has not always happened backwards and forwards. between the middle school and the high school. And in programming, in developing things. And so a professional, a personalized learning plan that's developed at the middle school shouldn't stop, whatever system is being used, shouldn't stop and then start over again when they come up to the high school, right? It should be a continuum. My understanding is that doesn't happen. So those are systems and they take time to fix. And things we need to put in place. And so that's going to be critical for those conversations. And we're really trying to design our professional learning days with our staffs to provide them those opportunities to have those conversations because they haven't always happened. And so we really think those cross-curricular, but also cross-grade level conversations really need to happen. And that goes back to when we talk about portrait of graduate. Portrait of graduate's not just the high school, right? And that's always the focus. Oh, the high school's got to get their portrait of graduate. No, Wyndham Northeast needs to get their portrait of graduate. And that's a pre-K through 12 conversation. Because what we do with our students in preschool and kindergarten is going to affect how they end up at the other end. And so it needs to be a whole conversation as opposed to very siloed conversations. And I think that's going to be a key piece for us moving forward. A lot of the conversation and the work that Mike spearheaded and everything fits in with a lot of the things we've been able to uncover when we talk about credits and whatnot, and where the state of Vermont went away from credits and went to proficiency-based learning. If you go on their website now, you can't find anything that talks about credits on the AOE. It all is about proficiency-based learning. And when I started talking with other SUs and SDs around the state, some of them wouldn't even report that they require any credits because they're moving to proficiency-based learning. Now, proficiency-based graduation requirements have been around for a long time. So it's taken this much time for schools to start migrating to that and move away from those hybrid systems where you get credit and proficiency, right? And just moving to proficiency. And that takes a lot of packaging. We need to explain that for parents and for students. Because it's really hard to understand that we're all experts in school. We all went through school, so we all know what school should be and what school experience will be for kids in the future. And the current kids is very different from our experiences. And where we understand, we went to all school and we took algebra. Then when we finished algebra, we all took geometry. And when we finished geometry, we all took algebra 2, right? Because it was a system that was in place, right? That is a system that is designed to put us into the industrialized factory. And so now those ways we go about doing it are very different and it's very confusing for a lot of people. So it takes a lot of unpacking. So that's going to be a lot of work. And I guess I'm saying this because I know it's going to take not just this year, it's going to take multiple years of us developing this to come with a nice, neat package. So we got to do it along the way at the same time.
So I have a question for you, Kelly. And I'd like to see if anybody else has a question for you. So I'm thinking when you're going through that we need to have the board some sort of checkpoints as far as like check-in, like how's it going and stuff like that. That would be one. And then the second thing is, so say we have a new board, 6 months, 3 months, whatever, the time March, whatever that is. We have 3 or 4 new board members. How do we put a policy in place where the next board can't forget about this? Big policy? That
I would not recommend that you make a policy around it. However, I think having some type of check-in points of like having Kelly develop some type of a plan for implementation so that you can have expectations of when those pieces are coming. I mean, you currently have a policy that says how many credits a student has to earn. And we uncovered that was back in 2006, I believe, or five,
Was it?
2005, when that policy went into play. And so, you know, you want to have whatever system we have. If we make a choice to say maybe you don't need as many courses, let's say with the word credit, if you don't need as many courses to graduate or proficiencies, we don't want to just all of a sudden say, okay, let's cut it off now. And, you know, we got to have a step down just as you step into your higher credits, you want to step down and look at that. So I do think having Kelly and her team develop a kind of a timeline would be very, and have you adopt. So if you want future boards to have you adopt that timeline of implementation would be appropriate, because then that would be a legacy.
Why did you just say that?
So I gotta talk it out.
Because we're gonna try to do that with the buildings and grounds as well. It's, you know, put something in place so that, you know, we're gonna expend all this money, you know, the next board, you know, might be like, yeah, we wanna go this way instead. So anyway, we're trying to fix things permanently. I guess.
Start over every
Yeah.
year.
So go ahead.
So I think you make a good point. I think for us, as a current board, we want to make sure that we're making decisions that are impacting us next year, 3 years, 5 years, so that future boards and future administration, you know, whatever, is taking that and continuing moving down the road. I think what happens sometimes is we make knee-jerk reactions and then we become reactionary to these quick decisions. I think to Andy's point in terms of silos, whether it be in the community, whether it be within the district, I'm not sure. But I really feel like doing the heavy lifting, and Mike, I appreciate all the work that you've done on it. I really feel like having the data there, having viewpoints, and then really similar to buildings and grounds, setting up a plan so that, yeah, future boards can change things if they want to. But if there's a rationale and a plan in place that has the key participants in it, it's gonna be really hard to unpack in a negative way, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. So, Tara, I hope you got that, legacy timeline adoption for the minutes. Thank you, Tara. Anybody else? Mike?
I just, well,
Sorry.
Andy, you, in some of the notes you released today, you said you were making a recommendation to the board or a suggestion to the board that we suggest to you, the administration, that we establish a task force to attack this issue. So I didn't know what you had in mind specifically. Was that something to include board members on that task force? When I hear the task force, I usually think that's where concepts go to die. So,
Well, I did not mean to say that.
no, I know,
So,
tongue in cheek. But what did you have in mind in terms of what kind of a task force could we establish to keep this going? Because I see this as this is not just a one snapshot, take a look. This is continuous improvement. I mean, we're doing a lot of great stuff in these areas already. That doesn't mean we can't do better. So it's just part of continuous improvement. And so input, you know, digest the data, move forward, rinse and repeat. I mean, that's just part of. So what did you have in mind in terms of that suggestion?
So thank you, Mike. I mean, just like we talked about the capital improvement plan, and I talked with other principals, they're not plans that a principal does all by themselves, sitting in their office one day. It requires all stakeholders. You need representation. So you need a board, you know, you should have a board member on there because that's a representation of that piece. And you need community members, you need parents, you need students, you need teachers, and you need administration and everyone coming together. And I think with the high school, with this conversation, you're going to need at times, you know, representation from the career centers and to have those conversations. But so when I'm referring to a task force, it's a committee of stakeholders that is looking at building that. And typically, a lot of that work is done like when you do NEAS every 10 years. So I'm not sure, you know, the process that was followed here in the past, but I know that in other schools, when I was a building administrator, And I can remember when proficiencies first came on board, how much time I spent in committee walking through a lot of this stuff with, when we brought, you know, like I said, we did that kind of a thing where we brought it all in and then we made a presentation and a proposal.
Yeah.
For how we do it, as opposed to, people thinking, pointing the finger, it's Rob's fault that this happened, right? Or it's, it's Kelly's fault, that it's a consensus that comes together. You've drawn data, we looked at this, this new data point that we didn't even know existed, which we're very excited about, like the, what are the BSAC, so things like that are really important for us to draw on and for that group to look at to make those recommendations. I can remember we talked about, fiscal literacy, right? And it's important, and fiscal literacy is important. And, is that something that we want to incorporate or not incorporate? And does it replace one of our traditional math courses? Or is it an add-on of a math course? So, and just, the back and forth arguing around it at this table or in water coolers and stuff like that doesn't get it done. But if a collective group comes together.
Is this the advisory council that you're talking?
No, that's totally separate.
Oh, that's totally separate, okay.
Totally separate. So
Sure.
this is something I'm saying that I know is worth the building needs to do.
Right, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your question about takeaways, so again, thank you. I think some of the key things I took away, one is, I know the language of equity can be really politicized, but I think this exercise, was a really important one for the community and for the board, right? That it really centered unique needs that some students and families in our communities have, right, to be successful. And I hope that that lens, right, of equity and being open to different people needing different things to be successful continues. So I just want to center that. I think that's really important. I think the other thing that's really important, right, is that the kind of premise or concept of voice and choice, right? How important it is for students to have voice and choice, right, along their continuum, and that we continue to provide or increasingly provide, right, a more robust options for our students. It's really interesting when I looked at the RBTC climate data, for example, I looked at it with a slight bit of envy, right? When you look at how students are experiencing the climate in that building, it's light years beyond where we currently are and where we have been for some time. And I'm of the opinion, and I think data and research would support this, that students, when they're happy, when they're seen, when they feel a sense of belonging, when they're getting what they need, right? Everybody wins, right? And so I just, again, it's that sort of voice and choice piece that I think is really critical. Again, that student voice in particular in the PLP process, that we need to do a better job of listening and centering student wishes. And the last thing is just really that the role of the environment, right? Like continuing to approach things from the lens of collective responsibility, that sometimes our systems, our beliefs, our policies are part of the problem, right? And so I share in the need for that to continue, that we need to continue to center that. So thank you. So yeah.
Any questions for Kelly?
No question, but can I propose that we task the administration with a task force to follow up on this?
Yeah.
So that's one way to have it not die.
It is currently not an agenda item, so I think that would be
You want
out of
that
bounds.
before PCBs or after?
Yeah.
That's how the board feels, and then you can come back to that.
Right.
Yeah, we can ratify it.
So, Andy gave some good, board advice. I think the consensus of the board is to do a task force. And then how would that look? Who picks them? Like, do you pick them, is it a dartboard or what?
Well, I think that would be part of Kelly's
He
putting
needs
that
to go
together,
pick
how she would, what she would see, like, like invite people, you don't, you want to invite people first typically, then you volunteer people, or volunteer people, but typically you want to give people that opportunity you don't wanna, say to, pick, like, well, June, we want you on that, and June's like, well, I got too much on my plate, and I'm not doing it, and then that feels awful.
Anything else?
Yeah, Rob, I think just one other thing, and I think we all, we all want things done quickly. In a time, in a timestamp or time sensitive way. And for me, I feel like this board has done some heavy lifting and I would love to see that continue, but I also feel like the work is also just starting. I think I've seen dean of students now that we have in the middle school and we have in the high school. So there's, I think, collaboration going. I talked to, I was at a game tonight, and the band directors working with the central school, working with the middle school. So you're starting, and I don't know if that's through Kelly's leadership or if that's just a natural flow, but you're starting to see additional conversations. And I feel excited that we're not starting when they're entering this building in ninth grade, but there's a full plan in place starting in seventh grade. And I feel like we all want things quicker, but I think if we want to do it right, and I think times change, technology changes, we want to make sure everyone that leaves this building, I call it a rising tide raises all ships. We ought to elevate everything. So it's those college kids that are going through and the ones that are going into career centers. We want them all to be successful. What does that look like? I don't have that answer. And so I think running through some of these exercises and having this dialogue is extremely important, in addition to continuing having community feedback.
Great, thanks, Rob, appreciate that. Priscilla, anything?
Save it for director's comment.
Okay. All right, next up, we're gonna move on, is unfinished old business, we don't have anything there. And we have director's comments, Priscilla, go ahead.
Start with someone else.
Right. Rob.
I'm gonna say everything I need to.
All right, Jennifer.
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike.
Smoking up tonight, thank you.
Tanya.
I'm all set.
David.
I believe that we have budget meeting Thursday. Is the hour 3 o'clock? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, Zoom world. Fellows Falls Union High School Budget Committee meets Thursday at 3 o'clock here. We invite your participation. I'm not sure if Zoom will be going or not, but that might be another way to get with it. The two items that I have on my mental agenda here, Kelly, are a look at Jim Vazina's object-based budget. Do I have that correct, Mike? And also, I believe we're looking for what I informally refer to as the McCollum grid from, which I hope we'll be able to have a look at and maybe discuss a little bit. Apart from that, I suppose that we can always entertain adjustments to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. So one more time, 3 o'clock, I believe that's 26th, am I correct?
27.
What's date, Ellie?
26.
Okay, 3 o'clock Wednesday, October 26th, budget.
Thursday.
Thank you. 3 o'clock Thursday, that's Thursday, October 26th, here at BFUHS. A comment.
Thank you, David. Priscilla.
Yeah, congratulations to David.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It amazes me to sit here and hear the idea that a lot of these things are just totally new. When I think back to when I taught here and retired in 2017, and a lot of these things just seem to have been here at that time. One thing that is some special needs students stay until they're through their 21st year. So they're building skills all that time. They're certainly in a flexible pathway. Also, I heard CODAs and I heard Heather both talk about students needing more skills. Terry Pride has always required stepping up. and setting high standards. I certainly don't want to see our high standards going down at all as we do more of this skill-based proficiencies and working on that. Yes, the proficiencies are within courses. If we cut courses, we're going to get less skills, less proficiency. Do we want to, I ask you, do we want to lower standards or make students rise to the level of achieving those skills? Being there, working on those skills, developing them so that they really can have a career or go on to college. We don't have periods. We have a what kind of system? Block system. Within the block, you can do instruction. You can do projects so that you're working on them. You can do getting the students ready, those students that don't take it home and don't do their work. Therefore, you have all of that kind of incorporated there. So that's why that always worked for me. It also allows the teachers to have less students through the day as far as the total students. Yes, you can put more in the classes. Keep in mind that CCV limits theirs to 18, and what we asked K-12 Solutions to do was to do an average of 20. So I'm a little uncomfortable with that number personally, but that's up to administration to work on. The art room could only have 15 in it to be safe at the time when I was here, so I don't know if that's changed. We have independent studies. We have flex pathways. We have recovery programs to help with those skills so that if a student doesn't make it, but I certainly don't want to lower our standards for 1 or 2 students that are not making it. There's a man out there that did a huge program on just saying not lowering it, and I can't think of his name for the life of me at the moment, but I will before the next meeting. He did a song that went along with it too, so I'll find that. As Andy said, we're looking at NEASC accreditation. I'm really interested in how that will come out because I think they set our standards higher, and I think we need to set our standards higher, even if we had to increase our skill levels and the things we need. The information we got was wonderful. Don't get me wrong. It's deeply appreciated. It is important to realize, though, that it was not a committee that set up all those different things. It was one person from our board. Although we had started with the committee. It seemed to be geared to those students. 60% of our students, Andy has told us in budget meeting or more, go on for some kind of increased education, increased training, increased stuff. So all of the things that we heard are geared to less than half of our students. So we didn't ever really address the academic students because I guess it was felt that maybe we have good programs for them, but I think we need to keep that in mind and remember that we can't cut back on those things. We just need to add and do better for all students. It would have been nice to include a little more on those. I don't know why it didn't happen. It seemed like kind of more of a narrower focus than what I was hoping to hear from all of that. Although, like I said, the information was good. We've mentioned going back and forth. Music has always done elementary, middle, and high school as far back as I know. I think COVID kind of set us back a little, but it's always done that. Special ed in particular, I know when I was here, I started working with 7th grade students before they got here. So I did 7th grade, 8th grade, and what was going to be expected of them when they got here. So maybe special ed was a little further ahead, I don't know. But I do think our freshman academy stuff where they reached out and they brought them up and all of that interaction did help. A few years ago, back when I was here, we had a community breakfast with the principal, the board, and community members and a teacher rep that met once a month. We've got a lot accomplished. We heard from people. We heard from them on a regular basis. I would love to see that happen again. And to sum it up, our football team made playoffs and they're playing here. I think it's now scheduled for Friday night. Hopefully that gives you lots to think about. Thanks.
Thank you, Priscilla. Just have a couple quick things. I think it was a productive meeting. I think we have some direction on what we need to do next, as far as buildings, grounds, and the portrait of the graduate. I'd like to give a shout out. We were talking about 7th through 12th. I'd like to give a shout out to Connor, our athletic director. I don't ever recall having 8th graders play up, and I guarantee you that that is excellent. I know it's excellent for those kids that are playing up, because they're only going to get better as they get older. And I wish we had done that for a long time, especially a few years back on a personal level. And I think he's doing a great job. So Kelly, thank you for making that happen. I think it's just a great thing. And they, again, athletics, you learn a lot of stuff. And I'm a huge fan of if you set the bar to a certain level, I think kids will hit it, whatever that level is. So if you set your standards high and everything, they're going to hit it. I think kids will always surprise us in a great way. And one thing that Andy, 2 words he has taught me is rigor and relevance. So that's what my expectation is for students in this school. Make it a challenge and make it relevant to the world. So that's it. I call this meeting adjourned at 7:22.
Agenda items for next meeting, because I'd like you to put on D22 and D23 for policies.
Sure. Could you email those to me, Priscilla?
Yeah, they're the library materials and the instructional materials. For some reason, they got off. He got left off the high school.
Yes, because I didn't know about them. So I do send out. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Next meeting is we have the budget meeting, and it's the second one day in November is our next high school meeting. 13th. So, thank you. All right.
Well, just real quick, I know we mentioned in football, but soccer, girls soccer had a huge overtime playing victory today. So I think we need to recognize them as well.
Wow. Did not know that. Way to go, soccer. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Yeah.